Hi guys, it's Zug and welcome back to another video. Today I bring you my opinion for The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book on the Mistborn trilogy, one of the books on the Cosmere universe, and the first book I ever read from Brandon Sanderson. And let me start by saying I loved it. I loved it so much. I have the whole book with sticky notes. I had a system, but then I gave up, but I know more or less. The pink ones are related to the magic system because I was so interested in the magic system that I wanted to catch every single explanation about each part, everything. The blues are just story, the greens I don't recall, but basically it's this. If you don't know what the Final Empire is about, it's set in another world. We learn a little bit about the Final Empire, and in this Final Empire the Dark One, the Dark Ruler One, and he's the massive ruler, is worshipped like a god himself. He calls himself a god. And we have two main characters. We have Kelsier, who's trying to do a plan to overthrow the Dark Lord and to restore the sky, right? Because in this Final Empire he separate races. There are different races that have different powers and genetics, and he segregate them. So we have the scars. We are basically slaves for the nobility from this Final Empire. So Kelsier wants to overthrow. Our second main character is Vin. She's much street rat, and she goes from thief crew to thief crew. She's a half-breed ska, which is illegal. The nobles cannot have children with skas. They are ultimately killed before that, but she was able to survive. And she has a power in itself. She has the power of the allomancy. Allomancy is one of the magic systems on this world. There are basically two that we talk about. We have the allomancy and the ferochemists. And she met Kelsier, and Kelsier tests her, and she is a Mistborn. A Mistborn is basically a person who can manipulate all the metals in the allomancy system, and there are only two types: or you are an allomancer of one, or you are a Mistborn with all. There are no in-betweens. And basically this is the story of the first book. They are trying to pick up the plan, a lot of politics strategies, everything, to overthrow the Dark Lord, and how they're gonna do it since he's a god worship like. Now, the lore in this book is heavily. It's one of the best I ever read. It's so deep. Everything is so well explained. Sanderson's writing style, I thought it will be very heavy because, as you can see, it's a very chunky book. A lot of descriptions, and I was like, no, it's gonna be very confused. It's not. It's very interesting, and you have I had a magnetism toward the story that I was so captivated to read it and to continue and to learn more of this world, and it's so captivating. At the beginning you can sound very confusing what everything is going up, and I think that is how I started fantasy. I was like, what is happening? And then I start catching up and everything starts to make sense, and it's so good. I totally loved it. The plot in this book is much more centered on strategic games. You don't have you have some action packs, especially in the end. The end is so good, but in between it's more a strategic, it's more a political war, and it's more about how it's gonna play, and it's an introduction. You get a lot of the magic system of Vin's training. You get a lot of how things start working, because they have to overthrow a god, so they have to start building an army so they can overthrow and control the city. They start to plant seeds on the nobility because they are the great houses. They control a lot of the markets, and they have to destroy them basically and turn once against the other. And how they do that was very interesting, and I really like a political war and how you mess up with the politics and with the relationship between high powers. They're so good, and I really enjoy that part of the story, although it's not so much fantasy or into action, but I really liked it. The strongest point of this book is obviously the magic system. The magic system is based on the ingestion of metals in the case of the allomancy. So an allomancer, which is only born in the nobility has the ability to burn certain metals, for example iron, and then he has a counterpart is an alloy from that metal, for example steel. Same thing with copper and bronze, which I found very interesting for me in the chemistry spectrum, and how everything is planned. So each person, a master, can burn a different metal. For example, a copper is called a smoker, so it can hide the elementic pulses, because when a person is performing elemency, they send like pulses, and they can be individualized, they can be tracked to the person and the type of elementor that is. So someone who burns copper can hide that pulses, so in an area, so much more like strategic one. Then you have the bronze, who is the seeker, so he can see the elemency, so he's the one who can see the pulses. For example, you have zinc and brass, which much more with emotion. So and there's a lot of explaining with the magic system. We have the internal and the externals, we have the pushes and the pulls, and it's overwhelming at the beginning, but I think Sanderson gave a so detailed but so cohesive explanation of the system that you will understand by the story. The most common ones are the iron and the steel, which is more or less pulling and pushing metals away, and then how they explain how they can use and how they work the push and the pull. At the beginning it's very like I'm not understanding, but then you start flowing with the story and you start flowing with the system, we start seeing in action, and you start to understand what the system is about. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's a very cohesive and it's a high magic system, and it's a very closed, I think it doesn't have many flaws. Even when we see something, there's an explanation, and it makes sense. It's not that just explanation that it's because it is. No, it has an explanation, and it makes sense. For example, there is a part where Vin says, I can feel the dark ruler energy, like he's smoothing me, and Kelsier says it's impossible, we are protected. And from what we learned before, we know that you can have a higher burning, which is flaring the metal, so you can give a boost. So why not in that case the seeing and the hiding of the elemental pulses can be controlled with that? I thought it was so interesting, and it makes sense. That's the point, it makes total sense. The characters are very well designed. There are a variety of characters. The main characters being Kelsier and Vin are the best. They are not narrators, they are more the persons you follow, and it gives you a lot of perspective, although you follow sometimes others, but those one are what gives you the overview of the world. Vin, being so young, she learned a lot of lessons from her brother, and we see the impact that the Final Empire had on her and her childhood, and how she starts to change and to grow while she's in this crew, trusting each other, trusting others, trying fall in love. There's a plot of romance here, but I think it's not the main focus, and it's just something that naturally happened, and it was enjoyable. And not in the case that it wasn't necessary, but I feel it's not a major detail that everyone will be mad or happy, but it is enjoyable. The way she works, the way she acts, everything is so well characteristic. The feelings, the ideas, the even her own beliefs are so well designed, and each character has their own belief and her own physical traits and psychological mannerisms, and how they all interact with each other. It's so interesting. And Kelsier, it's the master plan of all that, and how we see him deal with problems that he has. He has his own past demons, he has his own sometimes doubts, but the mastermind of that, when something goes wrong, he starts to think on something else. It was very interesting, and it's definitely a character that you empathize, you know, because even when you start not empathizing, you see why he's acting like that, and makes you connect, you know, even when you say, well, I don't think he's right, but I understand where he's going from and what he came from. So we see and we understand that. And the same happens with Vin when they start to argue from different decisions. And the other side characters are very entertaining. You have Sazaz, who is from a different species, and he's a ferrochemist. And in this case, the system of ferrochemist is not so well explained like allomancy, but it's important in this world. While allomancers burn the metals, the ferrochemists can store their own energies, so it's not external, in the metals, and that they were like a ring or a bracelet. And it's a different system, but it's also so interesting, and the way they work. And the character is also very important for Vin especially, but all the other parties of the crew plays a different role in the story. It's very interesting. It's a very rich story in terms of characters and on dynamic between them. Even when they are talking about politics, the different points are so important. I totally love the story. I want to know more, because the way it ended, it could be seen as a closed end, but I also can see how it's gonna be open and how it's gonna go from there, and I really want to know what happened next. This is definitely one of the I understand now why it's so hyped on booktube and on the book community in general. It's an amazing story for someone who is not so into high fantasies, for example Wheel of Time or something. I think Sanderson is a great introduction to these worlds, because of the way he explained, on the way he do the info dumpings of the magic system, of the characters, of the world, is in a way that is so entertaining and is so captivating that you feel fine reading, and you like it and you enjoy, and you continue reading more. I read this while I was doing my reading slump and my rest, and I was so enjoyable by reading this. I was so happy. It made me really feel connected again to the book. So I think it's an amazing piece. I cannot praise anymore. I think it will definitely be one of the books of the year. Maybe the series itself. I heard that the second and the third are even better than this one, and I cannot wait to read them. I totally recommend it. It's totally worth it. It's a big one, yes, but it's worth every page. So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed my review, and tell me in the comments if you read this one. I know that some of you have already read it. What are your thoughts? I'll post videos every Tuesday, Thursdays and Saturdays as always, and I see you guys on my next video. Bye!